we need to talk about transparency in Cardano projects. Ready? Let's go. Money is going to be lost on Cardano projects. It's inevitable. That much we know. The only part we don't know is which projects are going to lose everybody's money. Faced with that uncertainty, the community is largely going to push projects into one of two choices: controversy or transparency. The reason I say that is that a lot of these projects are not going to be in the situation where they just build out their project in stealth, you know nothing about it, and then they come out of the blue and they're like, here's our project, go ahead and use it. In a lot of cases, that's not going to be what happens. What's going to happen is they're going to do some fundraising first and then build out their project. They're going to have an idea and they're going to have some humans, and maybe if you're lucky, they've done some work already, and they're going to get your ADA, and your ADA is going to be what's used to build out these projects. And all of that is fine. We're not even going to talk about the regulatory side of this. Regulators will have something to say about whether or not all of that is fine. But taking those regulatory issues off the table, just talking about the relationship these projects have to the community, all of that is fine. Raising funds and then building a project is kind of how startups work in general. What's not fine is if there is an asymmetry of information that results in people buying things and not really understanding what they're buying. If someone invests in a project and they think the project is something it's not, that's a problem. This usually results from a lack of transparency. And there are various categories where we see this. One of the biggest ones is the team. And we're not going to talk about individual projects. There are some ongoing controversies right now with certain DeFi projects, and I'm not going to mention their names. But if you look around social media, you're gonna very quickly figure out which projects are kind of under the microscope right now and are seeing a lot of attention because people are asking questions. There are gaps in the information. And one of the biggest gaps is around the people involved. The most common gaps is around the people involved in the project. So when you invest in a Cardano project, you're usually assuming, hey, there are going to be people involved in this project who are going to build something. And generally that's something that's going to be built involves smart contracts in Cardano, and that involves Plutus, and that involves functional programming in Haskell. So granted, if it's an NFT project, maybe not. If it's something else, maybe not. But largely, a lot of these projects are going to require smart contracts. And when someone invests in them, they're thinking to themselves, okay, there's going to be some Plutus work done here. That's going to necessitate that somebody understands Plutus. So we kind of need to know if somebody on the team understands Haskell and functional programming. And there's a spectrum of acceptable possible answers to this question. If you've got some developer who's a 15-year veteran of Haskell, knows everything there is to know about functional programming, great, tell us. If you've got some budding young developers who are going to learn Plutus in the Plutus Pioneers program, fine, just tell us. Because there's a difference between those two things. I'm not saying either of those two teams of developers couldn't produce a great end product, but they're two different things, and you need to tell us what you got on your hands. You know, those might be, maybe those are on different ends of the spectrum and you're somewhere in between. Just tell us, tell everybody, here's where our developers are at. They've never done a day of Haskell in their lives, but we think they're very, very smart. They're going to learn everything they need to know in the Plutus Pioneers program, and then they're going to go. If it's the case that you are creating a certain type of project, and that is a project that the Plutus Pioneers program has a complete example of, and you're just going to borrow all of the code from the Plutus Pioneers program to build out your project, fine, just tell us. Just tell us, hey, we're not even going to develop any Plutus Haskell skills. We're just going to take this already existing code and turn it into a project. Just be transparent about that. Say, hey, Lars Brunius, the instructor of the Plutus Pioneers program, he already has great code for doing what we want to do, and it's open source, and we're just going to take that and turn it into our project. If that's the case, great. Go ahead and tell us that. If you don't have a tech team, if you don't have any developers, and you're going to use the money you're raising to go out and find developers, great, tell us. But it's an important metric to your project that you let the people who are giving you money, you let them know what you're doing. So we've got sort of the composition of your team. Another question is, are the people who you're listing as your tech team, is their time, their professional time, 100% devoted to the company? We're not talking about their Netflix time. It's okay if they have a life outside of the programming. We're not saying they need to be 100% devoted to your company, but it's different if you have a tech team who is spending, their professional working day on your project, versus the situation where you have interlocking tech teams among a bunch of different companies. Say you have a family of companies that are all developing different DeFi projects, and the community notices that all of the tech team are the same for all these different projects. That's okay too. There's no law against companies utilizing the same tech team, but you need to be transparent about that. You need to say, hey, the tech team for this project and this project and this project are all the same, which means that our tech team is spending, maybe a third of their time on each project. You just need to be transparent about that and let people know that that's the case. And just to be clear, this is not the conversation about regulatory compliance. This has nothing to do with regulatory compliance. That's a completely separate subject. How you project runner are complying with the applicable laws and regulations, that's up to you. This is not that conversation. This conversation does not involve how you get yourself in compliance. This is just how you keep from getting in trouble with the community, in my opinion. So fake it till you make it is not the road to avoiding controversy with the community. If you are not transparent on any of these issues we've talked about, people are going to ask questions. People in the community are going to ask those hard questions. They're going to say, hey, I cannot see any traces of Haskell experience in your tech team. People are going to ask the question, do they have experience with functional programming? Do they have experience with Haskell? And like we said, if they don't, that's fine. You just need to say so. You need to say, no, they're going to learn it in Plutus Pioneers, or they're learning it this way, or it doesn't show on their resumes on our website, but here's how they have Plutus experience. If you don't lay that out, people are going to ask the question. They're going to make mean memes about you. This is already happening in our ecosystem. They're going to start threads on the subreddit about your various companies when they realize that the tech team has completely changed from a couple months ago, or it seems to be the same people who are members of the tech team of all these various companies that you and a few other people are related to. These are things that are already happening in our ecosystem. People are already starting threads in the Cardano subreddit complaining about these gaps in information. And then all of a sudden, there's controversy. Companies are way better off not to do the fake it till you make it thing. I know that's very tempting. And I don't think I think very few projects start out with the intention of hiding anything. I don't think they start out with the intention of hiding anything, but they realize, hey, or they think they're in this big race. They realize, hey, there are a bunch of other DeFi projects trying to do the same thing we are, and there's a little bit of a race. Whoever is sort of open for business first, whoever deploys first, is probably going to have a little bit of a first mover advantage, and they're going to get some customers. That could be right, that could be wrong. Definitely, we have a lot of examples in the business world of companies having, like, I think even somebody on this channel pointed out that they worked at a company that did phenomenally well, and they jokingly said that they had 40-second mover advantage. They just learned from all the people that came before them and did a better job. But I think a lot of founders of these projects, they think they have to get to market as quick as possible, and they do a little bit of the fake it till you make it thing, and they don't actually have a tech team, or they don't actually have a capable tech team, or they don't have a tech team with any experience in Haskell. Certainly, very few people on Earth had any experience in Plutus prior to, the last year. It's even a small percentage of developers who had any exposure to Haskell. So it's okay. Projects should know, everybody knows there weren't that many Haskell developers compared to the total number of developers out there in the world. So it's okay if you have this like phenomenal tech team, but they've just never done Haskell before, and they're going to learn Haskell and build out your project. That's great. But don't do the fake it till you make it thing where you kind of hide the fact that nobody on the team has ever done functional programming before, because that's probably going to lead to people in the community making threads about you, making posts on Twitter about you, making memes about you. Like, all those things are going to happen. You've got a choice. You either get pushed into that kind of social media controversy, or you're just transparent up front. But if you're going to raise money, people need to know what they're buying, and you can't really hide anything, because the community's going to realize that there's some missing information, and they're going to give you a hard time. They're going to push you into this land of controversy. The use of bots on social media has been another source of controversy. We've had companies in our ecosystem accused of using bots on social media. The implication is that they're trying to make it appear as if there's a larger community behind their project, or there's more interest in their project than there really is. And it seemed like when this happened, the particular project came back with a response that it was like some kind of mistake, like they had bought some kind of an advertising package and somebody didn't realize that bots were included. And I'm not sure the extent to which the community bought that explanation, but nobody's going to trust you if you use bots to try to make it look like your community is bigger than it actually is. And this is a technical community. We're all interested in technology in Cardano, and Cardano is some pretty cutting edge technology. So if you're spending all day on social media talking about Cardano, you probably have a much higher level of tech sophistication than the average person. So these bots aren't going to fool the community. They're going to notice you're using bots, and nobody's going to trust you if you're using bots to try to inflate the appearance of the size of your community. Also, as a side note, I know my cursor has maybe been resting in different spots on these infographics throughout this video. That was not to indicate that I'm talking about a particular company or anything like that. The cursor has just been going in random places, so don't think there's any significance to the location of the cursor as I'm talking here. Another thing that the community sometimes views with some people in the community view it with a furrowed brow. So if you have raised a bunch of money in the community through other means, and then you go to Catalyst, some people don't look too kindly upon this, especially if you raised a lot of money. If you raised a lot of money in the community through some other means, whatever your fundraising means was, and I'm not at all commenting on the regulatory propriety of any of those like fundraising mechanisms, but however you raise money in the community, if you raised a bunch of money and then you go to Catalyst and you're like competing with a bunch of, non-profits and like really small projects that, don't have any money at all, like the community is probably going to look at that with a pretty furrowed brow. They're probably going to have a raised eyebrow to you raising even more money in Catalyst. I'm not saying there's necessarily anything wrong with it, but it's very apparent that there has been at least some level of negative reaction to that so far. Another one, if you have an executive on your team and they previously worked for an entity that has exactly the same name or a confusingly similar name to a famous company, but it wasn't actually that company, you probably shouldn't put that on your resume, on your company's team page on that person's resume. And you should probably be asking some questions about why this person had a company that had exactly the same name as the very, very famous company. But you definitely should not put that on the team page without some explanation. Again, there have been accusations around these kind of things already in our ecosystem. These kind of topics have come up even very recently. If you think about it, it's not really outlandish that the community gets up in arms about any of these things. There's no gatekeeper in Cardano. It's a permissionless blockchain largely. So anyone can start a project, and again, we're not talking about the regulatory side, but anyone can kind of fire up these fundraising mechanisms, and there's no gatekeeper who's going to say, hey, this project is ridiculous. These guys are never going to achieve the things that that they say they're going to. There's no verification institute that says, oh, this is a good investment, this is a bad investment. So, and I mean, even projects that look fantastic, that have all the right qualifications and experience in functional programming and the right kinds of executives and the right kind of marketing, even a project like that could fail. That's not what we're talking about. But there are going to be projects that will lose user funds. People will lose money on some of these projects. And once it all unravels, people are going to find out there was never really much of a company there. There was somebody who was promoting the fundraising, and there were a few people who they had put in positions to appear like a competent tech team, but there was never actually a competent tech team. That's going to happen in our ecosystem. And the people in our ecosystem who realize that's going to happen, they're the ones who are getting so up in arms when these kind of red flags pop up. When it's apparent that a company is going down the fake it till you make it path, and there's a good chance they actually don't have the competency to achieve what they say they want to achieve. And to be fair, there are going to be companies that raise a bunch of money and they don't have the competency to achieve their goal, but they raise so much money, they're actually going to be able to hire people. They're going to be able to hire the necessary competency, and they might even achieve their goal then. But there are also going to be some who do not, some who fail. And that's why the community gets so up in arms when there's this lack of transparency, when there's this asymmetry of information. The opposite is also true. If a project doesn't have the requisite competency, but they're super transparent about it, if they say, hey, look, we've got a bunch of tech people who are fresh out of school, but we think they're very talented. We're putting them through Plutus Pioneers. And when they come out the other side, they're going to build this project. That company is probably going to receive a lot of leniency from the community. The community is not going to embroil them in controversy. They're going to say, okay, who knows? Maybe these new tech people, these new software engineers or developers are, maybe they're going to achieve their goal, maybe not. We don't know, but at least we know what they are. At least we know what we're buying. And I think that's what the community really cares about. So I don't think there's a big mystery. I don't think anybody says, or anybody should say, I don't understand why this company is embroiled in controversy, because there's a very consistent relationship between transparency and not getting embroiled in controversy. And the companies that get embroiled in controversy, there's always this hidden information, this gap in the information. And there's always this reluctance by the company to fill in the blanks. It's sort of like, oh, look at our team page. It explains everything. Or, yeah, actually, there's far more to the team's qualifications. It's just not on the team page. There's always this hidden information. And there's always this implication that eventually we're going to learn that the team is ultra qualified. But we never quite get there. You notice we never quite get there. We never quite find out the hidden information. The companies get embroiled in the controversy. A lot of the times it's that there will be mistakes. There are going to be people who try to create controversy about a company, and they're going to be completely wrong, and the company will be, completely vindicated at the end of the day. That'll happen too. But in a lot of cases, there is this obvious relationship between transparency and not getting embroiled in those kinds of controversies. So hopefully companies will heed that and just be transparent from the start. Talk to you tomorrow.